Good morning, Trump family. Welcome to Open Source News. Have a great Tuesday, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, the following is a collection of news from Patriots. Let's get into the news this Tuesday morning. And the Democrats are absolutely panicking at the school board levels and, of course, probably the federal and state level as well, aware this one group of people that they thought were on their side has now risen up against them. Yeah, we've seen the Latinos rise up against the Democrat Party. Now we're seeing Muslim doing well. Why? Because some of the same stuff that they Latinos walked away from are now Muslims are waking up to the fact that, hey, everything you're teaching in school with your graphic portrayal of sexual contact and sexual pictures, and everything goes against everything we teach our children, and they have banded together with Christians, pushing back against the evils of the public school system in the state of Michigan. Hopefully this erupts all over the rest of the country as well, because they are being assaulted everywhere. So of course, the mainstream media is not talking about this story. I'm sure that the Biden regime's already planning some air drone strikes are mostly peaceful, of course, against these Muslim communities, because of course, we can't have them pushing back against the LGBTQXYZ agenda in public schools. So let's kind of dive into the story over here. It says hundreds of Muslim parents shut down Dearborn, Michigan school board meeting over Democrat-endorsed child prong books. That's right. For well over a year now, American parents have discovered that while sending their children to school and trusting them with local school boards and administrators, these same people were pushing prong books in the school libraries. Many parents around the country were shocked last year when they become aware of the illegal prongs books their local schools were pushing on kids in the student libraries. This phenomena is taking place across the country. One book that was found in several libraries is titled Genderqueer and Memoir by Mia Cobyb. Right. And it's a graphic book anyway. What we have fun. Find out here is we're not going to go through all that. What we found out here is that the Muslims and Dearborn is now pushing back against the regime. So the Biden regime obviously supports this film, right? It's very wicked. Parents across the country protested against the decision to place these prongs in our schools this week. Muslim parents shut down a school board meeting over the prom books in their schools things. That's right. See, the only power that the regime has over us is continuing to keep us divided. There's many things that we have in common, the Muslim faith, the Christian faith, as far as set of morals that you don't want your children to be indoctrinated by this overly predatory way, that schools have been going about pushing this type of content on children, essentially, grooming them, right? That's what they've been doing. And Muslims and Christians in the school district here has banded together to push back against the regime. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Biden regime along with the AG Merrick Garland are trying to plan some mostly peaceful strikes on those parents. Because of course, we know earlier this year, the Department of Justice and the FBI has designated parents who push back against this type of filth domestic terrorists, so of course, I'm sure that these mostly peaceful Muslims will now be being paid to visit by the Biden regime FBI in order to ensure that they get with the program. And then, this is some big news, it's absolutely crazy. Even Kamala Harris recently blaming Republicans. The reason we're not doing anything, the reason we don't have any solutions is because Republicans don't want to work with us. But really the solution has always been and will always be just enforce the damn laws and secure the damn border. And every single time White House critics say that, they say, well, it's not that simple because I don't know my racism or something. I mean, they've been fighting tooth and nail across the federal courts, appeals courts, and even all the way up to the Supreme Court to stop Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. But then all of a sudden, the Biden administration does a 180 and implements their own version of the Remain in Mexico policy that worked under the Donald Trump era, except, you won't believe what I'm about to tell you. Joe Biden's DHS just announced their own Remain in Mexico policy, except it doesn't apply to everyone crossing the southern border. It only applies to Venezuelan illegal migrants and refugee seekers, asylum seekers. I wonder why that is. The open border compassionate liberals straight up just announced a law that discriminates against Venezuelan border crossers, and pretty much ignores everyone else. I wonder why we're going to talk about it. Of course, we've got some stuff to get into. Wait till you guys see what Biden is doing this time. I mean, this is just absurd. Alright, folks. So obviously a story like this is not going to make the mainstream news, and so it's only being reported on much smaller local news outlets. Let's take a listen to from KDSM-9 News. Cityville. Paso is responding tonight to the announcement from the Department of Homeland Security regarding migrants from Venezuela arriving at the southern border. I'm at Morgan. We first told you about the story on KTSM-9 News at 5. DHS announced the Venezuelans entering the U.S. illegally will be returned to Mexico. The agency said it is also working to create a more orderly and safe process for people fleeing the crisis in Venezuela. DHS that is also working with Mexico to address the issue. Mayor Oscar Lucer releasing this statement saying in part, quote, "This decision will provide some much-needed decompression as we manage this humanitarian crisis so that we may treat every individual with compassion while following the law. And as all of us would like to be treated," in quotes. Now all of this as millions of dollars from the city of El Paso's general fund is being used for upfront costs for the migrant. Okay. Effective immediately, DHS is sending Venezuelans who cross illegally back to Mexico. Wow. I mean, they've been telling us that we are conspiracy theorists for calling out their great amnesty plan, their clear goal to continue enabling illegal border crossings, and then eventually with the hopes of granting asylum to those illegal border crossers. And then, of course, with the intention of granting amnesty to all of these illegal migrants, tens of millions of them effectively buying new Democrat voters. We're going to let your crossing illegally skip the line, break the law, and then we're going to reward you by granting you citizenship or a pathway to citizenship. And when we do that, you better vote Democrat. That's clearly the goal. And this basically proves it because they're picking and choosing. They want all illegal migrants to have a fair shot. The border should be open for them to come over and make their case as to why they're refugees and seeking asylum, of course, except for the Venezuelans. Why that distinction? Well, very simply because Venezuelans in many cases, like Cubans, are actually fleeing communism. They're actively fleeing a communist dictatorship. And that means when they come to the United States, they see all of the communist and socialist red flags and they don't get on the Democrat bandwagon, have free stuff for everyone and expanding government welfare and power, aka Venezuelan Americans don't vote for Democrats. In fact, Venezuelan and Cuban voters, legal immigrants from those countries and asylum seekers are the reason that the state of Florida is turning into a Republican stronghold. Take a look at this excerpt from his article 1 found Magnus Wayland as how Venezuelan Americans embrace Trump as their savior. Not exactly the greatest framing. But let's just take a look. In recent years, amid the political and economic crisis in Venezuela, the number of Venezuelans migrating to the United States has significantly increased. The population of Venezuelan origin in the country has tripled since the beginning of the century, showing its most significant growth in the past decade. According to the Migrant Policy Institute, the number of Venezuelan immigrants has increased 54% since 2015, reaching 492,000 in 2018, compared to 256,000 in 2015. This spike makes Venezuelans one of the country's fastest growing communities among other immigrant groups. The population growth has also made the Venezuelan American community and electorate dependent to in a swing state like Florida home to close to 80,000 eligible Venezuelan voters. An estimated 50,000 of them are registered to vote. This was very likely one of the factors that sparked President Trump's interest in the Venezuelan political crisis and the Venezuelan American community. He identified an opportunity. He held rallies at Florida International University and roundtable discussions making explicit his support for Venezuelans and their cause for freedom, democracy and capitalism. The courtship Republicans initiated seemed to pay dividends as Venezuelan support for Trump swelled, and worried Democrats. The post-mortem in Democratic strongholds like Doral, the city with the largest Venezuelan-born population in the country, showed a 41.1% swing towards Trump. Trump eked a 1.4% win in the city in 2020, after having lost by 40% to Hillary Clinton in 2016, when she obtained 52% of the vote, a 41.4% swing in a Democratic county, because Venezuelans overwhelmingly switched to the Republican Party and supported Donald Trump. And as we continue to cover voter demographics and the shifts that we're seeing Hispanics switch to the Republican Party like never before. And then the Venezuelan and Cuban communities. These shifts have become monumental. And so what the Democrats are doing here is they're saying open borders, for everyone except for Venezuelans there with Venezuelans. We're going to have Trump-style policies, sending them back into Mexico where they can make their asylum claim over there. I mean, You cannot make this stuff up, folks. It is so clear what this corrupt, disingenuous administration regime is doing is a total admission that Donald Trump's policies work. They kept telling us that don't Trump's remain in Mexico policies don't work. Ignore the data. Donald Trump's immigration system was broken. And all the problems we're seeing today, well, they're all his fault. They keep telling us they fought tooth and nail to stop his remain in Mexico policy. But anyone who's being honest and paying attention to this issue, in fact, even the migrants themselves will tell you that essentially the Brandon regime is full of crap. Well, would you look at that? What do you actually enforce? Border laws. When you actually enforce laws, you deter crime. Who would have thought the Brandon regime is once again being totally exposed for their immigration amnesty scam? This is why they're constantly trying to sneak amnesty and bills that have nothing to do with the border. Republicans vote against it. And then they say, whoa, Republicans voted against those Social Security and voted against reducing the price of insulin when Republicans are trying to stop Democrats from sneaking amnesty into a bill. I mean, their intentions are clear, their hypocrisy is clear. And this shows you exactly who they are. They aren't the compassionate liberals that they pretend to. They're calculated political snakes that play games of manipulation and propaganda that play by their own rules, and the media never holds them accountable. How is this not a major story, and how are people not identifying the clear, despicable nature of the DHS's new policy here? The Democrats are trying to buy voters with their open border policies, but of course they only want to buy Democrat voters, and clearly Venezuelan border crossers aren't on that list. How disgusting is that? And I will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching the video.